You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV about the worst case scenario of Thomas Jefferson's dream.
I thought you were going to say it was about arugula.
About arugula.
It's a vegetable.
What's that? It's a vegetable. I haven't had arugula in 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
Picked a silly one.
You did pick a silly one.
It wasn't sillier than I was expecting. It's as silly. This isn't a movie where, I mean, I've seen this movie in the last 5 years. I watched this movie. It's like one of my put it on and feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm upset. I'm Jodie.
I'm Jodie, and this is my father, Ed, who I hung out with last night while I watched this movie.
I'm unwell.
Yes. Andrea may have a fever, and I am Jodie. And we watched a dad movie, My Blue Heaven. Yes.
Your dad had just impeccable taste, obviously.
What I'm learning from this is that Andrea and my dad would have been buds. Like, you guys would have just liked all the same movies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He loved an
Parents
underdog.
always love me, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I'm like everybody's favorite, every parent's favorite friend, always.
Yeah, I definitely, while watching this movie, realized why my dad liked it. It was so his sense of humor, and it was so silly and so dumb and so like, also there's a Yankees joke right in the beginning, and he hated the Yankees. I think I told you this, or maybe it was on a Jersey podcast, but that my dad very seriously said that I could never marry a Yankees fan.
Yeah, I don't know if it came up on this podcast, but I do know that. And he was not joking.
No, he was very much not joking. Like,
so funny.
I could do pretty much anything, and he would just roll his eyes. Like, he didn't like that I had tattoos. He was like, "Why are you in art school?" All this stuff. If I had brought home like a diehard Yankees fan, he would have had a real, actual problem.
I love that.
So
that is funny.
Yeah. This was fun.
It's so fun. I was looking at reviews. We'll get into all of that. But people being like, it relies on a lazy stereotype. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like,
should we talk about how the like last acceptable stereotype and group to make fun of is Italians?
That's a Pete Holmes bit that I really love.
I know it is. Italian Americans. It's so like, I think we have to stipulate though that this is a very bad accent. Like, this is so bad.
I mean, we'll get into it, but Steve Martin wasn't even supposed to play Vinnie, and Nora Ephron, who wrote the movie, had to tell him it's not about the accent. It's about the I think the line is like, it's not about the accent, it's about the hyperactivity. And I kind of think I'm always waiting in this movie for you to find out that Vinnie himself is faking the accent.
Right.
The guy who he's based on, which we'll get into, isn't. I mean, I know the accent is New York, I guess, but it's New York Italian, right? Like, it's Italian American, New York, North, or Jersey, whatever that accent. And so my like headcanon is like he's faking it anyway, and that's why it slip slides all over the place.
Well, and the character person real life thing that he's based on was not actually Italian American.
Oh yeah, I meant to say that out loud and I distracted myself. Correct. So that's all.
So the faking it part kind of makes sense with that.
Yeah.
Wow. Steve Martin.
What a gem.
Like with most older movies that we do, I'm always like, are we going to find out that this person that I love from my childhood is a problem and a predator in some way? And as far as we know, he's not. And I'm so happy about that.
And anybody you ever hear talk about him who knows him personally only has good things to say about him. He does seem lovely.
I freaked a little bit when I saw how much younger his wife was. But I also, like I said off mic, like she was a full-on adult when they met. And it actually seems like a really sweet story. So
yeah, and if she wants to date an old man, she's allowed.
I mean, it's Steve Martin. Like, she probably gets like serenaded by banjo, and they have a beautiful art collection.
I can't wait to hear more
about.
Also, Rick Moranis in this movie is maybe peak. Can I say something without people getting mad? Like, I love him. So I love Rick Moranis in general. I just think he can do no wrong in my eyes.
But when he throws that guy, the ex-husband, out,
and they have him in his like undershirt. Yeah. And I'm like, okay.
It's the only time in my life I've ever found Rick Moranis attractive.
Yeah, exactly. But I do he's like this perfect little contained ball of like good to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's very sweet in this movie.
Why don't you tell me and our listeners what this movie is about?
This movie goes all over the fucking place.
There's a lot of plot in this movie.
There's so much plot. Like, I think too much plot. Like, I'm afraid to criticize this movie. I'm afraid you're going to hate me forever.
No, you're good. Say what you got to say.
No, and I don't have any real criticisms because it's not trying to be something serious.
Right.
Like, it's not attempting to say something really meaningful other than like maybe something about male friendship. But okay, so this movie is about Vinnie Antonelli. So Vinnie Antonelli is a mobster from New York. He and his wife are being relocated to California near San Diego because he is informing on the mob. When he gets to San Diego, he's being managed by Barney. His last name is so great and I've already forgotten it. Coopersmith.
Barney
I didn't want to get it wrong. I knew you'd be mad. He is being handled by Barney Coopersmith. Both of their wives leave them in short order. Barney's wife leaves him for a baseball player that she is the therapist of, which is a violation.
Huge ethical violation.
Yeah, not okay. Not okay. And Vinny's wife leaves him because she doesn't want to live in the middle of nowhere in California and she wants to live in New York. Get that idea fully. Mm-hmm. And then hijinks happen. Vinny keeps doing crimes because he just doesn't know how to do anything else.
He can't help himself.
He just loves to do little crimes. They're so fun.
He does fun little crimes. You're so right.
He does fun little crimes. Barney is exasperated with him all the time. There's some
if I said tell me about this movie and you said Vinnie Antonelli does fun little crimes and Barney Coopersmith is exasperated all the time, I would say you nailed it.
Yeah,
that's the movie.
Yeah, I mean that's the gist. So there's some love interests that come in. Hannah Stubbs, the DA or assistant
another
DA,
fantastic name.
I know, played by with just our love, Joan Cusack. I love her and everything. Vinny has a couple of love interests. One played by Carol Kane in a performance
Sheldine. What a name! Another one.
Oh my God, Carol Kane in anything.
Perfect.
Like just put it in my veins. Okay, so Vinny has two love interests really. One played by Carol Kane as Sheldine, who mysteriously just leaves the plot when the other police officer, who has been pining over Vinny the whole movie, finally throws herself at him as a hostage.
He makes the hair on the back of her neck stand up.
He does, yes. And there's this subplot with the local mobsters. Apparently this is where they put all of the mobsters, this one small town.
I know, it's totally unbelievable because of like
They
whole
would never
idea
put them all in the same place.
But it is so funny that there is this secret
crime community
of
Yeah. So he's still doing crimes. He runs into all his old buddies that have all been relocated to this one town right by San Diego. And then the sort of culmination of the movie is the mob guys, I guess, trying to find him and kill him. And at the same time, he's like, his new scam is raising money for the Little League field, but it's not really a scam because he's actually building the Little League field. And so at the end, is he? And then I see your face. And at the end, Vinny and the other cop, whose name I actually don't know, maybe Crystal?
Her name's Crystal. Good. Yep.
Oh, wow. Look at me. Vinny and Crystal fall in love and have a baby.
Yep.
And I'll get to that. One of the little nitpicks with the filming is that there's no way that baby is as old as it is, but in the 1 year later time frame. And Barney and Joan Cusack's character, Hannah, fall in love. And the Little League field gets built and there's trans pride flags everywhere. And everybody's happy and everybody's wearing uniforms that look like Steve Martin's white suit.
Oh my God. So funny. What a funny touch.
And all the mobsters are dead and, the mean ones that wanted to kill him. And then, and all of the local mobsters that have been in witness protection are all working at the field doing various tasks.
They're all doing semi-honest work because they're
selling peanuts and cassette players.
So good. And Sheldine and Linda Vinny's first wife are at the park, and they are both now married to the two hitmen who'd come out.
Everybody's friends now. It's fine.
So
I mean, that's actually
silly.
kind of nice. Everybody's cool with each other.
It's so sweet and so silly. I think my favorite.
I want to jump in real quick before
Yes.
we get into it, because I found our Jersey connection.
Ooh.
And since we're talking about Linda,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think we're going to talk much about Linda going forward, because she's not a huge part of the movie. But Linda's played by Deborah Rush, who's been in a million things. But she was born in Chatham, New Jersey.
Oh, that's nice. Good
She's the
job.
only one I could find.
That's amazing.
She's also married to the son of Walter Cronkite.
Oh.
Yeah. She married into the journalism family.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. I just had to get our little Jersey connection in there.
That's perfect. That was a great one.
It's the only one I had. So can I ask you something?
Uh-huh.
If we're psychoanalyzing little Andrea as a child, why was this a movie that gave you such comfort? Can you think back?
Yeah, I think
we've talked about how you're the John Candy and I'm the Molly Ringwald, but why did this movie come to your mind?
I've been watching this movie since I was so young.
I know.
When did this movie come out?
90.
It's I don't remember seeing this in the theater. I was only 4. But it is quite possible I was dragged along. I don't remember not knowing this movie.
So my friend Ryan, who's a year or two younger than me, literally texted me last night and said that he saw this in the theater. Which he would have been, I don't know. How old was I in 1990? 14. So he would have been 12.
I mean, Steve Martin's a clown. It's a very bright, if we're really thinking about it, it's a very bright movie. It's kind of slapsticky. There are dance numbers. It's very sweet. I also have always, I don't know what, but I've always loved a movie where there's not a huge conflict.
Yeah.
Whenever we get to the part in a movie where I'm supposed to be really worried I get a little too anxious.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really happen in this movie.
Even when the mobsters are trying to kill them, they're not going to.
No, it's so silly.
Yeah. There's no way.
The first time they show up, it's during a dance number, and a falling chandelier is what saves them. And then we cut to a hotel room where the two of them are they're basically in bed telling secrets together. It's just, I love this. I have always loved a movie that's just about people becoming good friends. I don't know what, I really love a enemies to lovers story. And that's what this is.
That is what this is. Yes. This definitely has some I wouldn't even say queer undertones. They're overtones.
This movie is a romance. Between these two. And I was saying to you off mic, the parts of it that feel very tender and sweet between the two of them aren't played for laughs.
No.
When Vinny is teaching Barney how to dance and he puts his hands on his hips, they do a little close up of it. Yeah. But it's not in isn't it funny these are two men touching each other way.
Right.
It's isn't it funny these two kind of opposite oddballs are starting to bond, and isn't that sweet and kind of silly that this is how they're doing it.
Well, and then he grabs his butt, and I thought for a second that was going to be ew, gay, whatever, because that's so common in those movies from that time where it could have been a moment of conflict, and instead it was just silly.
Yeah. Yep. I don't even think Barney
he doesn't
really reacts. An
No.
important thing to note is this movie was written by Nora Ephron. This movie was written by a woman who writes some of our she's When Harry Met Sally. She's the romance queen.
Yeah.
So it's not totally surprising that this movie is all wall-to-wall romance.
It really is. That's the focus. I feel like the mob plot line is just incidental to the fact that there's literally a title card that says everybody falls in love. That's the thesis of this movie.
The title cards are, I meant to pull up a list of them.
Yeah.
I'm sure
I took photos of some of them on my phone because they were funny. Because they're all from Vinny's perspective too. Mm-hmm. So it's Vinny is telling the story.
Yeah, well, it's teasing the fact that at the end you find out he's written his book.
Yeah. Which I knew was going to happen as soon as I saw the how to write a book kind of thing.
and he's like taking notes the whole time. Should we talk about now the inspiration,
the background,
and the background for this movie?
People may know this already. I didn't, because I had never. I know this movie, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, I think if you're, it is the like first thing you learn about this movie if you endeavor to learn about this movie. But there's no reason for a person to do that unless this is a movie they already. Yeah, exactly.
This is a wild fact, though.
Yeah, so
this is wild.
It is so funny. Also, my like favorite thing about this movie is it came out a full month before Goodfellas.
I know.
Because if you ask somebody what the inspiration was for this movie, if they didn't know, right? If they didn't know anything, you might say, oh, like movies like Goodfellas and The Godfather, like really blew up. And this is a parody of those movies, but not, I mean, yes, but no.
Yeah, exactly. It's in the same universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
so, Nora Ephron was married to, I always want to say Mitch Pileggi, who is the guy from, he's one of the actors in the X-Files. Nicholas Pileggi. Nick or Pileggi, I never know.
I don't know.
But he wrote Wise Guy, which is the book that Goodfellas is based on. And it is the like written account of Henry Hill, who was like an informant on the mob. Who again, Goodfellas and Wise Guy, he's an informant on the mob. He was like awaiting trial, I think is when he started doing this. And he started calling Nicholas Pileggi and just telling him these stories. And that became Wise Guy. Nora Ephron was married to Nicholas at the time. And she got to talking to Henry Hill as well. And she would also hear Nick's stories that Henry would tell him. Right. And the ones that were like, that seemed too silly for Goodfellas ended up being in My Blue Heaven. Like, it's like like, you know the movie Twins?
Yes.
Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Arnold Schwarzenegger gets all the good DNA, and Danny DeVito gets all the silly DNA. That's My Blue Heaven and Goodfellas.
Yeah, it really is. I have a fun quote that you may have read from this article about the background. It says, according to, because I think Henry Hill also wrote a book.
After
because he went Goodfellas.
Yeah, so Goodfellas is up through. Have you seen Goodfellas recently?
Okay. Maybe in the past 8 or 9 years.
I haven't. There's a montage of me saying about inappropriate movies. I haven't seen Goodfellas since I was a kid, but
I was 6 when I saw Goodfellas.
Truly, like, I can picture watching that movie in my grandparents' basement. Yeah. But Goodfellas ends when Henry turns informant.
Yeah.
My Blue Heaven picks up directly after.
Yep. It's basically
he really did go into witness protection and was removed from the program because he couldn't stop doing crime. And I think
I love that.
This is the very go ahead, read your quote, and then I'll say the thing I'm going to say.
Okay. I just thought this was really funny. So there's a quote from Henry Hill. It says, according to the ex-gangster's 2007 book, Gangsters and Goodfellas, he would get half-gassed and call Nick in New York just to bullshit. It was like therapy for me. Sometimes Nick's wife, Nora, would answer the phone and say, hey, Nick is sleeping. What's the matter, Henry? This is Aunt Nora. Hill would talk to Aunt Nora, but said he had no idea she was picking his brain for a script. That's my favorite part. When I saw My Blue Heaven, I flipped because she used some of the stuff I had told her on the phone for her movie scenes. She took a combination of me and alleged mafia operator Michael Francesi, who she had read about in the papers. I never got a penny for it, but Nick had been so generous with me that I just let it slide. Had it been anyone else's wife, ...
That is so
gangster.
mob coded. Or not even mob coded because he was in the mob. Yeah. Like the idea of like, well, her family always did right by me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Her family always did right by me, so I'm not going to murder his wife for taking my story.
It's so funny. That leads into what I was going to say, which is if you didn't grow up in an area that had a heavy mob influence, which like New Jersey, so North, I always forget that it's like, unless you live in like Rhode Island, Chicago.
Yeah. I moved from one to the other.
Well, it makes sense that you like Rhode Island. I feel like it's got some of the shady
It's basically northern New Jersey.
Yeah. And so South Jersey, we have the Philly mob. It's different. But we have one. And I'm not, and I've never been, there's no reason for me to be afraid of it. Like, and in fact, like, I can't claim to be like, to have any, I don't think anybody listening thinks that I'm about to say that I have mafia ties, but it just is around, especially when I was younger. And you always knew who the families were. Yeah. But I was never afraid. They all kind of felt like.
Not to be a mob apologist, but they also do things for the community that the community won't do for itself.
Just gonna say.
I'm not apologizing for the mob. I don't condone murder or racketeering or any of those things. But I will say that Providence, Rhode Island re-elected Buddy Cianci after he'd been in prison because he had like revitalized the downtown area.
The only people who have to worry about the mob are the people who get involved with the mob. Yeah. Like if you just live in an area where they're, you know, like heavily involved and invested in your community. Yeah. Like you don't have a whole lot to worry about as long as you like mind your own.
No, there's all sorts of stories about like, you know, the positive things. I do want to also just quote from from the same article in Mental Floss that Nora Ephron says about Henry Hill in real life was put into witness protection. He was sent to Redmond, Washington, the bicycle capital of America, which I didn't know was the bicycle capital of America, where he single-handedly started a crime wave because there was no crime there. And we kept getting all these collect phone calls from Henry asking for bail and other various forms of assistance. So, like, that's he did right by me, I'm not going to kill his wife bit.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. It's so funny. It's so funny. It's like one of those things where it's like the fact that there is so much truth to this movie. Yeah.
And it's such a silly movie.
It's just Steve Martin is a full-on clown. When I read the quote where she said, because you texted me when you were watching this, like, his accent is horrendous. And it is. It's bad. But I don't think it matters. Like,
no, not at all.
And in fact, originally, the casting for this movie is really interesting. Originally, Steve Martin was supposed to play Barney Coopersmith, which you could see him play in that, like, buttoned up. I think he'd be a little less, like, milquetoast, a little less hapless, and a little more just straight-laced.
Yeah. Or he could have been more slapstick than like, in terms of being a dork.
Right. You know? Yeah. I think Steve Martin can play it either way. Yeah. I don't know that, and I love Rick Moranis. I don't know that he has both sides of that in him, you know? Right. But they... also the first like actor attached to this movie was Goldie Hawn, right, to play Hannah Stubbs. And I love Goldie Hawn. We've talked about her. We did Death Becomes Her. Yeah. I think she's fantastic. I think she's a little, and I mean this with love for both of these actors, I think she's a little too like vibrant for somebody named Hannah Stubbs. Yeah. Like even when in Death Becomes Her, when they try to like schlub her up, it just doesn't work.
It's Goldie Hawn.
Yeah. And Joan Cusack is, lovely and beautiful, but she just knows.
She has that like sort of like we had a conversation last night that we may or may not elaborate on, where we were trying to figure out which one of us was Vinnie and which one of us was Barney. But I think in reality I might be closer to Hannah.
Is that what feels right to you?
Like just kind of a wet blanket. Like,
okay, Hannah is not a wet blanket. Neither are you. But Hannah's a little bit of a wet blanket, isn't she?
She likes things to go by the book. She likes rules. She likes when people do the things that are fair. She likes consequences.
And murdering turtles.
I think she's probably a Libra. She's very invested in justice.
And it's obvious to say that Vinny's a Leo, right?
Oh,
is that too obvious?
No, it is not.
I think he might be an Aquarius moon, though, because boy, is he a weirdo. Like for a guy in the mob, he really has some like silly, like kind of out there.
What's Barney, though? Pisces?
Oh, that's good.
I think maybe Pisces.
Pisces is good.
Or like Taurus, maybe.
Taurus was my first thought.
Taurus
and then
would fit.
They're both in his big three.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, back to casting.
Why isn't this a segment every single episode?
It should be.
Mm-hmm. So
back to casting.
Goldie Hawn left.
Yes.
And if things had gone as intended, Steve Martin was going to play Coopersmith and Schwarzenegger was going to play Antonelli.
I know.
So I can see why Ephron was like not worried about
the
Vinny's
accent. Doesn't matter. Yes.
No. But God, would I love to have heard Schwarzenegger with the
Italian mobster?
Well, what do you think they would have done? Because at this point, he was so famous and we kind of just let him do it. We like pretended his accent didn't exist a lot of the time. He could just kind of be in whatever.
Yep.
So I feel like it could have gone either way.
Yeah.
But I would have loved to have heard his Italian accent.
So much.
We need to stop saying Italian accent. I'm sorry. Or I need to.
Wait, can I describe the accent to you based on a quote from The Atlantic in 2015?
Yes, please.
As I am wont to do. Megan Garber of The Atlantic wrote, Martin spends the film affecting an accent that is 80% Don Corleone, 15% Arthur Fonzarelli, and 5% Super Mario Brother.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Anyway, I just had to get that off my chest.
And so you can see why, not too concerned. We just let Steve Martin play in that accent.
Yeah.
And Schwarzenegger left to do Kindergarten Cop, which is another movie that I haven't seen in a long time. But boy, did I love that movie.
I can't.
Oh, I loved that movie.
I can't.
And so they had trouble. They couldn't find another Vinny. So Ephron was like, hey, Steve, how about you play Vinny? He was like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know about the accent. I don't know. But she was like, it's not about the accent. It's about the hyperactivity. We'll also say Vinnie Antonelli has ADHD. Like so much of Vinny is about like poor impulse control.
Yes.
Like that's his biggest issue.
Yes.
He's never still. There's not a moment in this movie where he is still for any second. I love him.
Yeah.
And then, if you've got Barney Coopersmith open for cast, it's who else but Rick Moranis?
Yeah. He was originally, I think she wanted him originally, but he wasn't available when they first were going to
and I think there was like a strike or something I read
there was a strike.
Pushed things back.
Yep. Yeah. Also, Danny DeVito turned down Vinny. Can you imagine?
The thing is, I think one of the things that works with Vinny is that
he's not Italian.
He's not Italian. He doesn't really make sense.
No,
he's he kind of feels like a fish out of water anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, cause that's what this movie is, right? And there's so many, I'm going to say 100 times, like they don't make movies like this anymore. But that plot, that fish out of water story that I love so much. I just watched Captain Ron for the first time.
Oh God, that's right.
I made my roommate watch this and they were like, well, we got to watch Captain Ron, which is like the same. It's not the same movie. It's very different, but it is a buttoned up Martin Short.
Yeah.
With really loose, free Kurt Russell, just totally upending his life.
Right.
And it is, I don't know why I'm a sucker for these.
Well, and it's funny because in this movie, that trope is so common.
Mm-hmm. What about Bob?
Yeah, exactly. But what I found fun about this movie was that there was less time where Barney was exasperated.
Yeah.
It was he was charmed earlier than I expected him to be. And like the second half of the movie is more about how his life is improved by letting go and being a little looser and how he doesn't, he buys in pretty early. He's not fighting it the whole time.
Totally. And it's so sweet.
Yeah.
It's like really lovely.
Yeah.
The scene when he is at the work function or whatever, and he wants to dance, and he has learned from Vinny that you should just tip everyone. And he's so smooth and he goes over.
Everyone.
That's right.
Which is a philosophy I agree with.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he goes over and hands the band leader. He does the very smooth and leans in, and then the music changes and we have another dance number. Makes me so happy. It's just like, look at him go. He's doing it.
Yep. We have to talk about the dance number. The dance numbers. We have to, because I texted you a little video last night being like, this was worth it, regardless of what I thought about this movie, which I liked the movie. But Bill Irwin, who played his Barney's partner.
He's also great.
Do you know what his background is? Can I share information with you about this movie that you may not already know?
Please.
He is a graduate from Oberlin in theater arts. He is also a graduate of Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey's Clown College.
Stop it.
In Florida. That's why he can do that with his body.
That's amazing.
He also received a MacArthur Genius Grant in 1984. He's nominated for 4 Tony Awards. He was selected for the International Clown Hall of Fame.
Stop it. What?
And was inducted in 1999. He's like a super impressive. He was in, this is another fun one. He was in Bobby McFerrin's Don't Worry, Be Happy video with Robin Williams.
That's so nice.
There's a reason he stole those scenes.
It's so funny because I know him. He's in a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Like if you've seen Lady in the Water, if you've seen Igby Goes Down, if you've seen, I knew I recognized him. Show apparently. Interstellar. He's in another Jersey connection. He's in an episode of The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
Oh, nice.
He's been.
But he's in the Clown Hall of Fame. That's why he can do that.
Amazing.
Those dance scenes are
so fun to watch.
Fucking incredible. The joy, the like irrepressible joy of him on the sidelines, just dancing with himself.
Do you know what it reminds me of a little bit? I always think of the scene in Empire Records when, and not that Ethan Embry is nearly the dancer that he is, but when Say No More is playing and the girls are dancing and Mark is kind of like off to himself and he sort of like starts to dance a little and he like can't contain himself. It reminds me of that.
That's what it is. It's like that irrepressible, like it's coming from inside. He just has to move his body. It's so cute. Like for me, that stole the show.
He's so charming throughout this whole movie. Even before that, there's that part where
he so wants to go undercover no matter what. He
wants to go undercover so bad.
There's a really beautiful and flowery description.
He's Mr. Noodle.
Wait, what?
He's Mr. Noodle.
What's Mr. Noodle?
Elmo's friend.
Oh.
How didn't I know he's Mr. Noodle?
Oh, yep, he is.
Oh, he so is Mr. Oh, my God. I mean, I didn't know because he always has a big mustache and he's, 30 years older. But of course, oh, God, I love him.
Aww.
Wow. You just watched me become Mr. Bill Irwin's #1 fan.
Yeah. Well, it's the reason I didn't realize that is because I am 10 years older than you. And Elmo was not a thing when I was a child and watching Sesame Street.
He was not Mr. Noodle was not a character when I was a child, but I was a nanny. I was a live-in nanny for a few years, and they loved Mr. Noodle.
Got it.
Loved Mr. Noodle. He's so charming. Aw.
Can I read this is like, I just want to read quotes today. Can I read this quote from the LA Times?
Yeah.
So this is from the review in 1990 of this movie. And they're talking about the dance scene. And it says, this dance, too, is charming stuff in the pinky mauve twilight, but it's overshadowed by Moranis' white starched shirt buddy in the bureau, Bill Irwin, who gets merengue mad watching from the sidelines. First, one foot snakes out, then a leg, then a ripple shudders through him. Then his whole body seems electrified by the rhythms. His legs are rubber. His arms wrap around his own body in an erotic paroxysm. I can't say that. Paroxysm?
I think that's right.
Then as his superiors turn an aghast eye, the moment is over as astonishingly as it began. It's just such an amazing description of that moment.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, Bill Irwin, I think, is my... I almost said my favorite part of this movie. As a person who used to dance a lot, like that joy of like just letting loose. Like I used to consider myself a dancer. Mm-hmm. It was a big part of my like 20s and 30s and teens. And
we talked about
my cheerleading days.
Well, we did talk about your cheerleading days, but we talked about your swing dancing days.
Mm-hmm. Which is where I met my friend Ryan, who is the one who saw this in the theater when he was a child.
Okay. I love that. Probably during Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That would be when. Yeah.
Yeah. But I've been dancing since I was a little kid. And so just that, I just loved watching the way he could move his body. It was so amazing.
I understand why you want to say this is your favorite part. He's your favorite part of the movie, even if that's not the case. Like, he really is the like unsung, like, Steve Martin is being so big and so silly in this movie that it can be easy to overlook somebody like Bill Irwin, who is just but except for the fact that he just steals that scene.
Well, he's got the sort of like, he's sort of the in-between of Steve Martin and Barney. Like, he's got the uptightness of being like a cop and like wanting to go undercover, but he's also got like the underneath goofiness where he like just kind of like it explodes out of him every now and then.
Yeah, exactly.
Other sort of behind the scenes casting and other things that I found. Did you know that the cinematographer is the same one that did Groundhog Day?
Oh, perfect.
A lot of other things too, but that was the one that I was like, huh. The cast in this movie is just, I mean, it's like lights out. Like Joan Cusack, Daniel Stern.
I know.
Ed Lauter, who's also in Real Genius. William Hickey.
Yeah,
who apparently
unreal.
Barbara Streisand studied under William Hickey at the HB studio in the Village.
Interesting.
Wild. Just like an amazing cast. Also an amazing soundtrack.
Great soundtrack.
Such great soundtrack. I think I texted you, this is so jaunty. I was like bouncing around on the couch, like listening to the music.
Yeah, it's a great, My Blue Heaven, it's a great song.
Yeah, but also there was I Can't Help Myself, New York, New York, like Surfing USA, all of these like classic, you know, old rock and roll songs.
What a day for a mo, huh?
Oh, God. Yeah. I also do think that I now also understand why my dad loved this movie, because it is a love story about baseball also.
Totally.
And my dad was the world's biggest baseball fan. Like, he knew trivia about baseball's history like no one I've ever met. And he was the world's biggest Mets fan, to the point where I am still convinced, don't tell anyone this, that one of these days I'm going to sneak onto Citi Field and like drop some of his ashes. Even in the parking lot, because that's where Shea used to be. But that's sort of my someday I'm going to sneak out there, and because that's the only place he would want to be is Shea Stadium. And so the sort of the side plot about baseball being this like thing that brings people together, like Steve Martin brings Rick Moranis and Joan Cusack together at the baseball game to try to
what
like
a surprise
hook them
seeing you here.
Yeah,
it's like you invited me.
Yeah. And that the kids, you know, they're playing Little League, and and then at the end, the culmination is this stadium, and everybody works there, and and the mom is paying off the umpires.
So funny.
Yeah.
I love. That's the other thing about this movie. The integrated communities. There's something that I just find really sweet and feel good about that.
The mom
like,
is one of the only ones too that has like an actual Italian accent.
Yeah, she's really funny when she's like crying and he's handcuffed to Barney when they come in for the first trial, and then Vinnie disappears. Like, Barney eventually agrees to uncuff him so he can go hug his mom. Vinnie disappears, and you find out immediately that she was in on it.
Yeah, she flips him off. Yeah, no, she's great. Really her good. And the actress that played Philomena, her daughter, both have actual, to me, real sounding like Italian or Italian American accents.
Yeah, I don't know who they are, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that. The baseball there. The baseball scene I love so much because Vinnie is teaching. He's become like a fun uncle for the boys.
Yeah.
He's like, when Hannah says she doesn't want a hot dog, and when one of the brothers, who's Jesse Bradford, by the way, takes his wallet out of his pocket. It might be the other one who does that. And then he's like, never take your wallet out at a baseball game, and he teaches him how to pickpocket. Like, he's like, that all happens there and is very sweet. And
he's a funkle. He is
Funkle Vinnie.
Yeah.
My Funkle Vinnie.
Oh, no. Nice. What is your relationship to baseball? Do you have one?
My grandfather loved it. He was such a Phillies fan. And I grew up, my grandparents, like I have, I mean, I guess theoretically everybody has a mom and a dad, but I have a mom and a dad. But my grandparents really raised me.
Yeah.
So baseball's always in the background, but like it never clicked with me.
Got it.
I'm on NHL. Like, hockey's the only sport I have any interest
in. Right.
I
thought I remembered that.
But like, I've only ever been to one baseball game, and it was the Trenton Thunder. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I have an extremely romantic relationship with baseball. Like, growing up, my dad, like I said, was obsessed with the Mets. He also was obsessed with other sports. Like, he was a full-time, all-year round. He was a
sports dad.
He was a sports dad. He never really played sports. He was not athletic at all. But he...
That doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
In fact, it almost... Yeah. Like, the people who get really obsessed with it sports often don't play them.
Yeah. He was a huge fan of the underdog. So like, he always liked the teams that lost. Like, they all had these moments where they won. So he liked the Islanders. He loved the Islanders, and they had that stretch from 80 to 84, and that was basically it.
Oh, totally.
He was a Jets fan, he was a Nets fan, and he was a Mets fan. He liked teams that rhymed. But baseball was his first big love, and he was a Brooklyn Dodgers fan until they moved, and then he refused to root for the other two New York teams because they were American League teams.
That's funny.
And so when the Mets started in 62, he was like, I guess this is my team.
This is my team now.
But growing up, like, every road trip, we had WFAN in the car. Like, I want to talk about the cars in this movie also, because
the same thing to my roommate when we were watching.
Yeah.
You and I comment always on these, but like, man, what a perfect way to set a scene. I know it wasn't scene setting because it was just when this movie was filmed.
Yeah.
Like, but boy.
So one of the first cars that we see in this movie is a Chevy Caprice Classic, which we had. It was my grandpa's car that he gave to us.
Are you trying to say capiche?
No, I'm not. I'm trying to say Caprice. But literally, when I think about driving around my parents as a kid listening to sports radio, I am lying down in the back seat of a Caprice Classic. Like,
I love that.
A blue one with blue vinyl interior. Like, that was the car that I just, like, I slept in the back of while my dad listened to Mets games. And so seeing that right away, I was like, ooh. Yes.
I have horrible motion sickness, car sickness, and sports radio. Like, if it was on now where I'm stationary, safe in my studio, I would immediately start feeling nauseous because it also reminds me of riding around in my Pub-Up's car, trying not to throw up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's such a soothing memory to me, to the point where when I finally moved away from New York City in 2005-ish, end of 2005, I realized that you could, at night, when the signal was stronger, get WFAN on the radio in Providence. And so I would fall asleep listening to them talk about the Mets.
That's so nice.
And like, you know, I mean, we've talked about the fact that, you know, my dad is dead, and has been for about 12 years now. And I have not followed baseball since. It was like our thing. And I used to go to Mets games. When I worked in New York, I had, our company was partnered with a company that had season tickets. And so whenever they couldn't use them, they'd give them to me because they knew I was a huge Mets fan. And I just call my dad from the stands and be like, hey, I'm here. Because the seats were good. And so like, sometimes I could like hope he would see me, you know, if a foul ball went the right way.
Aw.
So yeah, I like literally haven't followed baseball since 2011 for that reason. But this movie kind of like...
Does it make you want to kind of seek it out a little bit?
I mean, it does and it doesn't, because I think that there's also like a sadness associated with it. But there was so much like, it just, this whole movie was just like hanging out with my dad. It really was.
Again, seems like he had impeccable taste. So that's
yeah,
great.
He did have impeccable taste. But I do think that, so about the cars, like there's the, you know, classic Ford Crown Vic cop car that used to be the thing that would strike fear into your heart when you were driving on the road.
Yeah, right.
But Rick Moranis also drives the same car I drove in college.
Which was a
Chevy Corsica. It was a terrible car.
It just feels so good to see those cars. My first car was an Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra.
Of course it was.
Maroon.
Oh, it had to be maroon.
With the wood paneling.
That's the exact car that I picture you driving in like high school and college.
I would drive that car today. Yeah. Like I loved that car. Yeah. I can still feel the like upholstery under my fingertips.
Yeah.
The
Chevy Corsica, there's this scene in the movie where Steve Martin is driving it and he's putting all the change in the back. That's the car. And he closes the trunk and it goes onto the ground. That car, this is such a random thing. That car notoriously was light in the back. And so whenever I mean, maybe not notoriously to the people that drove it.
Right.
Because in the winter in New Jersey, when the roads were slippery, you would fishtail like a mad person. Like,
I thought you were going to say motherfucker, which felt very out of character for you. I was really excited for a second.
Fishtail like a motherfucker.
Like a motherfucker.
No, but you would, to the point where I had to put like bags of kitty litter in the back of the car so that I wouldn't go crazy and
Jodie,
like fly off the road.
Thrilled to hear you say this because we commented on it. I'd never thought about it before, but my roommate said like, you need a lot more change in the trunk of that car to make it, but apparently not for a Corsica, huh?
The back of that car weighs nothing.
That's so good to know.
Yeah. And I think it was rear wheel drive too. It was just the worst car to drive ever in bad weather. You would just slide all over the place from the back.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's my connection to my dad with this movie is he always had one of those water jugs just filled to the brim with change.
Yeah. He was one of those.
Oh my God. Yeah.
We didn't have that giant jug of change.
Have I
know
told
people have,
them
though.
My dad's quarters story on this podcast or just on the...
I think it's just on the other one. You can tell it though. It's funny.
My dad, there are two things, is that my dad never spent change. It was a weird... I genuinely think it was an OCD thing. Like he was diagnosed OCD. That's not me being, he was so OCD.
Right.
That like, and also he didn't trust things like credit cards. He was like very...
My dad either.
That's so funny. Maybe it's probably their generation.
It's an old man thing. Like, yeah, he did not trust credit cards at all. Probably in my case, it's because my mom used to spend way too much money on them.
So that might be it. Yeah. But for my dad, he just was so weirdly worried about people stealing his identity. I'm not totally sure why. It's not like he was like but anyway. So he always used cash, but he never spent change. So he just always had change at home. And then another thing is that my dad, this is a difficult confession for me. And I just want our listeners to know I trust all of you to hear this with an open heart. He gave out quarters for Halloween.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
50 cents every kid.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And so he would get rolls of quarter. Really. Like,
that's really hard. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for holding space for me.
I didn't know that about you. And yeah.
So
trauma
my dad's
is real.
Yeah. So it's one of the things, like, it's a good thing my parents were divorced. There were a lot of reasons. And one was I didn't have to grow up in the quarters house for Halloween. Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he would buy rolls of quarters every year for Halloween. And then kids stopped coming to the house, but he would keep buying rolls of quarters. And
just in case.
Well, and I was talking to my one of my friends about this who also has OCD. And I was like, I don't know why he didn't just use the quarters from the year before.
Right.
And she was like, well, those were
last year's quarters.
Were 1994's quarters. What do you mean? You need new quarters for 95.
Oh my God. Amazing.
And so when he moved out of the house that he lived in when I was growing up into a smaller house, and he just had so much change that he was ever going to spend. And so he told me, he was like, if you want to come over and pack this change up, you can just have it. And then I had to call him from the bank and be like, there are $2,000 worth of quarters here. Are you sure? Like, you just... And I remember going to the bank in my Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra with a jug
in the back that like made a drag,
with two actually big jugs and then a bunch of coffee cans in the back. But
my God,
that Oldsmobile was not. You would have had to put a crane on the back of that car for it to react.
It was much better made than the Chevy Corsica.
Yeah, that thing was a tank. So that's my connection to putting lots of change in the trunk of a car.
That's amazing. What is it with dads and not trusting, like, banks?
Yeah. He's so funny. He was really, like, he had a credit card because he was also very, like, not proper is not the right word, but it was like people started getting credit cards and like having good credit was a thing.
Yeah.
And so that it was important to him to have good credit, even though he didn't trust. So he had like his one credit card. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he was very particular.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was not like.
I think actually in my family, it might have been an addict thing because both of my parents are addicts. And it was like spending is also an addiction that my mom actually like had.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she would spend way too much money. Like I remember the thing of like, you should put the credit card in the freezer for some reason.
Oh,
so you would use it or something?
Well, I think you freeze it in a block of ice.
Yes,
you don't
that's
just stick it in there.
So you don't just make it nice and cold so you don't want to touch it.
Exactly. Oh, it doesn't feel good on my fingers.
I mean, for me, that would be a thing. I have some sensory stuff. Like, I wouldn't want to use it. Yeah. So the article that I was looking at talks a lot about Little Shop of Horrors, which I know is another movie we've talked about in the past.
So good.
But so when I was researching this movie and I had been challenged to find something academic to say about My Blue Heaven, I Googled Steve Martin and the word masculinity. And I did this because Steve Martin in this movie and most of his movies has a very interesting, like, way of behaving where he's kind of parodying over the top masculinity, but in such an unconvincing way that it doesn't come off as like threatening, and it comes off as very aware of it.
It's like almost like he's doing it's like drag, like
yeah,
like he's like a guy drag king almost,
right? So when I Googled that, I found this article. It's just a blog, but it's a blog called Home Theater of Cruelty. It's on WordPress, and the article was the campy masculinity of Steve Martin.
Perfect.
I know, and we should link it in the show notes. I don't know who this person is, so I can't vouch for them, but the article was actually really interesting and talking about, it specifically references Little Shop of Horrors and his role as the dentist and how that's the only movie where he really goes full, toxic.
Yeah.
Basically. Let me read that little bit. So, in this article, this person says, Martin's work tends to rely more on a keen sense of irony than shock or disgust, but there is at least one glaring exception from his long career as a comic actor. Instead of satirizing overblown male confidence and self-regard by holding it up for good-natured mockery, which is kind of what we were talking about, for this role as the dentist in Little Shop of Horrors, Martin took his self-aware embodiment of faulty masculine qualities to its logical extreme. That would be his performance as Orin Scrivello, the abusive, sadistic, Elvis impersonating dentist from 1986's Little Shop of Horrors. Everything about Scrivello screams masculine: the black leather jacket, the motorcycle, the overconfidence, the condescending sneer, the exaggerated Elvis-isms. And so I do think it's interesting to think about, like, Steve Martin as he kind of lives in a no man's land when it comes to this, like, impressions of masculinity on screen. Like, I don't think I'm sure there are plenty of other people that have this sort of soft playfulness, but also, I don't know how to explain it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, and I think you don't know how to explain it because it is really unique. I'm trying to think, and there are people,
and is it like of its time, maybe? I don't know.
Because I love it. Yeah, because I'm interrupting myself over and over again because I'm thinking of examples and immediately shooting them down. Because there's like, I love a continuum or a dichotomy. I know those aren't exactly the same thing, but, there's like, I'm thinking of other actors that he's worked a lot with, like a Martin Short,
right?
Who has
or
the
Rick
playfulness,
Moranis.
Or Rick Moranis, who has the playfulness part down, and the like, sort of like playing in tropes of masculinity very differently, where it's like,
right, they're missing the bravado.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are actors who have the bravado but can't also, And I think part of it is his physicality, because he is just like a tall, handsome,
lanky,
distinguished looking like man. And so when he puts on the playfulness part, like he kind of has, I'm thinking John Hamm was my first thought for today, but he doesn't.
Interesting.
But he's not clowny enough. Like,
no, he's not. Yeah. He's actually, he's surprisingly funny, but he's not goofy in the same way.
Exactly. That's what I mean. I can't think of anybody who does this that way.
No, I totally agree. Later in that same article, it says it's still talking about the dentist, saying it's easy to imagine Martin playing a serious version of the role and doing an extremely good job of it. His comedic take on the character demonstrates he understands the mess of anxieties, fears, and fetishes that make up a man like Scrivello. And so I think that's really interesting. The idea of like, he could play this straight. That's kind of going back to what you were saying about how like he does, he also has the ability to play this in a serious way, but he doesn't do it.
Right.
So the end of the article just says, and somehow Martin performs the role in a way that makes Scrivello both hilarious as well as frightening, impossible to take seriously as a person, but still an ever-looming danger to everyone around him. Scrivello is pathetic in every way that matters, but he's also a paragon of the virtues society idolizes as the peak of masculinity. In other words, a Steve Martin character. So I think it's a great take on kind of what I was thinking about when I like Googled that, because I do think that he has a unique place in that sort of world.
Yes. I'd be interested to hear from our listeners if they can think of anybody who like who they feel like occupies the same space as Martin. 'Cause I really can't think of anyone.
Yeah. Okay. I have another question for you about this. So a lot of the movies we've watched have had the patriarchy as the enemy, right? It's kind of a theme that we've inadvertently stumbled on. What do we think about the portrayal of the women in this movie? Because it's not fully stereotypical, but it also kind of is. Well,
they're all pretty thin, but so are like even Coopersmith and Antonelli have, they don't have rich interior lives. So what do we have in this movie? You can either be a Stubbs type, which I think Coopersmith's first wife sort of is, right? The women are
smart, humorless,
buttoned up, or you get a Chaldine or a Crystal, who are like more free and open, but maybe a little sillier, right?
Right. Yeah.
Is there anybody
sort of beholden to the men in their lives in some like worshipy kind of gross way?
Yeah. And I think the only one who changes it all throughout the movie a little bit is maybe, I was going to say Hannah Stubbs. I guess she loosens up a little.
I think she does change throughout the movie. Yeah. I think that not like drastically, but like, I think the dance scene with Barney is supposed to show us that she's like loosening up. Yeah. And like, she goes from, well, I guess that's more of a Barney thing. I was going to say she goes from like allowing her ex-husband to just barge into her house, but he's the one that kicks him out.
Right.
She's happy about it, but
yeah, I don't think she has a big character shift. I think she becomes more open to letting Barney in.
Right.
And, the way that Vinnie affects every part of this community, he also does affect her life too, obviously, like with the kids and all. But I think she gets to be herself throughout the movie. It's just what we see of that is pretty thin.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the case. I can't think of any of the women in this movie.
No, I think you're right. I think she has more backstory than she would have if this movie had been written by a man.
Totally. Because
she does have a personality. She likes baseball. She, kills her son's turtle. She has a personality that's not just a reflection of the men around her necessarily, or isn't just seen through their eyes. Like, she has private moments.
Yeah.
It passes the Bechdel test. Like, she does have conversations. They're mostly about the men in the movie, the conversation she has with other women, but it's not in like a romance way. It's like if I thought what you were going to ask me was patriarchy is often the villain. Who's the villain in this movie? And there kind of isn't one unless it's the mob or Hannah Stubbs. like right. Who's getting in the way of what our protagonists want to do. Yeah. And it's the two hitmen who show up sometimes. Maybe and Hannah. Is it cops?
Is this movie anti-cop? Even though Barney's Barney's an FBI agent, which is still a fucking cop. But but it's a little different.
But I think that him being a FBI agent and Hannah being a cop, I think are part of the reasons that they're not seen as fun.
Right.
And they're not
totally.
Well,
and at the end of the movie, you said, and I know you were being like kind of both ways about it, that Vinny's big scam at the end is stealing all of the money by claiming that it's for this baseball field for the Little League team. And he makes a phone call while he's in jail. And the nice thing about having a crime ring already set up is you have a lot of resources at your disposal.
Especially in construction.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And man, boy, is this movie. See? You want to call this movie silly. It seems pretty accurate to me. Yeah. And it takes, all of however many days he's away. Very little time to break ground on this field. And there's a scene that I really love right at the end where Hannah's like, you expect me to believe or whatever that this has been happening all along and that he actually, and Barney says like, yeah, I do. What do you say? And he's like, what he means is like, no. And I'm lying and I know I'm lying. Right. And we're both just going to agree because it's better. And it's like, that's a huge, violation of your job. Yeah. Yeah. Which I love. Like, good for you guys. Yeah. Like, and now this whole town has just decided it's going to be a little illegal all the time. Like, yeah. And so in that way, it is kind of like, it's certainly anti law and establishment in a way.
Yeah. It's anti small town cop.
It totally is.
Like the places where we like the characters that are officers the best is when they don't do their jobs.
Yeah. And
like Crystal runs off with Steve Martin.
And says, just say I'm your hostage. Yeah. And that's so funny. I really hadn't thought about that until just now. But the thing that solidifies Barney and Hannah's love for each other in their relationship is not turning their backs on their jobs, not leaving their jobs. It's actually even more of a big deal is lying about, you know what I mean? Yeah. This huge case. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. It's anti small town cop.
Uh-huh. I'm cool with it.
Oh, God. That's funny. I don't know that I have much more to say. This was just such a romp.
Yeah. It's a nice little fun little.
I mean, we had, scary horror shit for all of October, which actually turned out to not be that scary, but dark.
Yeah. Dark.
Yeah. So we needed a lightness.
Yeah, and if you haven't had your fill of Jodie and I talking about horror movies, keep your eye on the New Jersey's the World Patreon, because we'll be over there talking about the last broadcast later this week.
I'll share that episode. Movie.
Please watch that movie, everybody. It's free to watch on Tubi and I think a few other places.
My God.
Please go watch the last broadcast. All I'll say here is that we proved just by timeline that Blair Witch couldn't have ripped that movie off. Yeah. And then when you watch the movie, they're doing extremely different things. Yeah. Please go watch the last broadcast. It's bananas.
Fucking wild.
Yeah. Save it.
It is wild.
But it is wild. Keep your eye. I'll share that episode on our Instagram.
Oh my God.
What is our Instagram? Watchers
Pod NJ. Yeah. No. Fully insane movie.
Please go watch that movie and let us know what you think. Even if you don't listen to the episode, actually, that's fine. Yeah. But if you need a little more horror from me and Jodie, that's one. you ready to tell us what we're watching next week?
Next week's movie, full caveat, I have not seen in probably 20 years, at least. I chose this movie because we're on a dad movie kick at the moment. We're going to be doing another dad movie in a couple of weeks. That is Andrea's pick. We will tell you what that is later. But one of my dad's favorite movies, he loved stupid humor. He loved The Airplane. He loved Steve Martin. He loved, Caddyshack. Like we're in a dad movie area right now. And so I chose one of my dad's favorite movies that also stars someone Andrea and I are very fond of from another movie. We are going to be doing a very silly movie called Top Secret. I'm
excited that you have a movie that your dad loves that I haven't seen.
I know.
It seems like that should be impossible.
It seems like you guys have seen all the same movies. So I'm glad there's one that you were missing. I was unsure if we should do it because, again, I haven't seen it in a really long time. I guarantee there's a bunch of misogynistic shit in it because there isn't a lot of movies from that time period, especially this type of screwball comedy, often relied on dumb jokes at the expense of the women in the movie. So that will probably be coming. However, Val Kilmer, in this type of role, is one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Let me just read a very quick synopsis of the plot of this movie. One sentence. An American rock and roll singer, played by Val Kilmer, becomes involved in a resistance plot to rescue a scientist imprisoned in East Germany. It's so silly.
I love this because it already sounds to me like it could be like a Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis movie. Like that like simple one sentence. Here's your character. Like, it feels timeless. And something we talked about earlier is when I said they don't make movies like this anymore. Like that's the kind of movie that I'm talking about.
And this definitely is sending up a lot of those earlier types of movies. Like it's a parody. It's like the Airplane Part 2 kind of like
Hot Shots, Naked Gun.
Exactly. It's so in that universe. And so the thing that pushed me over the edge with whether or not we should do this movie was I found out that this is one of Weird Al's most favorite movies of all time. He says it's one of the funniest movies, if not the funniest movie ever made. And we respect Weird Al's opinion in this house.
Yes, that's right. If you don't like it, you can leave.
Yeah. So we are going to go for it. We're just going to watch Top Secret. We're going to hang out with my dad for another week.
Hey, Jodie, I hate to break it to you.
What? My dad's dead?
Oh my God!
Sorry. I'm allowed to do dead humor. I am.
My dad is also dead.
I know.
Just so everybody knows, just for our listeners, that wasn't me with a living father laughing at Jodie's dead dad.
Oh, that's true.
But I also wasn't going to say, I hate to break it to you, your dad's dead.
You could have, and I would have laughed, but go ahead.
You said one more week, and you and I are on a podcast together, and I promise you at some point we will watch more movies that your dad loved.
Yes.
So,
yes, that's true.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, God. If we can't laugh, what can we do?
Oh, my Lord.
So,
okay.
Top Secret is available. Similar. Unfortunately, again, it's not a free one. I don't think I didn't look very hard. I also want to say that if our listeners have suggestions of movies that maybe they think we're missing, we may not do them if they're things we've both seen or don't quite fit our vibe. But yeah, we're always open to suggestion.
Absolutely. And do it now, because once we get 1 million downloads a week, we're moving that right behind the paywall, and then you'll have to pay good money to suggest a movie. Yeah. But now you can do it for free.
Right. Yeah. When we become the next, I almost said Joe Rogan.
Oh boy.
When I thought of a
Doughboys.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, thank you for giving me this little bundle of delight to occupy me last night.
I'm so glad you thought it was fun.
Of course it was fun. I knew I wasn't going to not like it. I mean, it's Steve Martin. It's just a different kind of humor. It's a kind of humor that I don't necessarily gravitate towards now as a serious, humorless woman. But that I loved as a kid because my dad and I would watch this kind of thing together.
Well, and that's just real quick. I know we're wrapping up, but I remembered there was something we said at the beginning of this episode that I want to just talk about for half a second. Is you said it's not the kind of humor you gravitate toward, and I keep saying like they don't make movies like this anymore, and I don't know if that's true. Maybe it is just that the only movies like this I'm seeking out are the ones that were already encoded into my DNA.
Right.
The only one I could think of was that movie Stuber, which was Dave Bautista and Kumail Nanjiani. And
I have not seen that.
Oh man,
I love Kumail.
It's again not a movie I would have. Well, maybe it's a movie I would have sought out because I love Kumail so much. But they did a screening in Philly that Kumail and Dave Bautista were at.
Oh, nice.
And it was one of those things where if you responded quickly enough, you could go. It wasn't like there was no reason I should have been there otherwise. So I went to the screening because I'm in love with Kumail.
Yeah,
and
as
so
you should be.
I was like, I will go see this movie and maybe get to put my eyes on Kumail. They gave out T-shirts with full Kumail's face and Bautista's face, and I got a Kumail one. I'll wear that next week.
Oh my God. I mean, if you ever want to fall in love with Kumail Nanjiani, just look up him playing with kittens on YouTube. There's one of those interview shows where they ask them questions while they play with tiny animals.
Puppies or kittens I also really loved his podcast. He and Emily Gordon, his
wife.
I was trying to not say his wife first because she's so fantastic on her own.
Yes.
But they're a married couple and they had a podcast together during COVID that was just fantastic. The Indoor Kids, I think it was.
Yeah,
called.
It was Indoor Kids.
And he also did an X-Files podcast for a while that they never finished that I also loved. Anyway, so now this is just the We Love Kumail happy hour.
Yeah.
But point being, that movie was a put two oddballs together in a really specific situation and see what happens. But it's still a little different. It's not, they're both kind of fish out of water in that one. But so I don't know. I don't know if we have any
slapstick comedies do still exist. I just don't know if they have the charm that I think there's something about the specific actors maybe and the directors of this time where it was like in the air that this silliness was like desirable.
Well, and there's a playfulness and I've said the word sweet so many times in this episode, but I think maybe that's what's missing from those movies today.
Yeah.
And but
I think you might be right about that. And that's based on nothing but intuition, so we could be wrong. But I do think the sweetness
you can think of anything else
maybe missing. Because even I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but even in Real Genius, a movie that you and I both love, a lot of it is that friendship, fish out of water, like love story between the two male characters that drives the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Have you watched Only Murders in the Building?
I watched the first season.
Me too. I loved it. I
loved it too, but I was never really inspired to go back. Yeah. I think I felt like they were probably just repeating the same thing again, which I could be wrong about. If you're a huge Only Murders in the Building fan, let us know that we should go back and watch seasons 2 and 3. But
also, if you are, can you tell me? I had somebody. This is such a side note, but this is such a side note. Maybe we'll cut this. One of my podcasts that I work on that I'm not usually on mic for because I just produce it, they asked me to be on mic for something recently. Mm-hmm. And then in their Facebook group, one of their listeners said, oh my God, producer Andrea sounds like Poppy from Only Murders in the Building. She's from season 2 or 3. Okay. And I looked her up and could only find her in that character in a big spoiler for the movie, for the show.
Okay.
And so I didn't really listen to her, and I can't find her talking anywhere else.
Okay.
So I would love for our listeners who hear me babble on plenty every week, who have seen Only Murders in the Building, to tell me if I sound like Poppy from that show.
Okay.
I was offended immediately just out of instinct. I don't know if I'm supposed to be.
Right.
So let me know.
Having only seen the first season, I cannot help you with that.
At the Watchers Pod NJ, let me know if I sound like Poppy.
Yes, and there's no the.
Did I say at the Watchers Pod? Mm-hmm. I'm unwell.
At Watchers Pod NJ on Instagram and formerly known as Twitter. Where can they find you personally to tell you if you sound like Poppy or not?
At AQ Andrea Q on Instagram and Twitter, I guess, if you want.
Yeah. And you can find me at my personal email, or not personal email, no, cut. I'm not giving that out. Oh God, I'm tired. You can find me at my personal Instagram at Jodie_mim, JODIE_MIM. It is my art account. So if you like art, like Steve Martin.
Oh, you didn't even get to talk about that.
I didn't get into his art collecting. It's not important. Steve Martin is a art collector extraordinaire.
He's an extraordinary art collector.
He's an extraordinary art collector. Fascinating man. But we're going to go now. Because I can't think anymore.
And we'll see you next week. Not in the woods.
East Germany.
In East Germany.
Yeah, we'll see you in East Germany. Pre-Berlin Wall falling.